I understand why people don't always trust their emotions because sometimes their emotions get them into trouble. They can lead them down a path.
It's a little bit more complex than that, insofar as emotions are neither good nor bad. Emotions are the energy of the body,
Sure.
just hormonal,
Hmm.
chemical. Yeah. When we repress emotions, they gradually build up. The classical one is the difference between anger and rage.
Uh-huh.
So, anger is a very healthy emotion whereby we defend our space, our integrity. And if you look at animals when they fight in a group, um, two of them will fight, and very quickly one of them will give up. The one that gives up, they give up before any serious damage happens, hopefully often. Um, but why does one give up and the other one not? What is the difference? One of them is determined to fight to the death, and the other one says, "Yeah, okay, no, this is too expensive for me," and skulks away. And this is something which is suppressed in our culture. Um, a lion, you wouldn't dare sort of kick a lion. I mean, you just wouldn't, right? You just wouldn't do
No.
it. You treat the lion with a lot of respect because you're aware that it's got fangs and that it's powerful. And so you are respectful.
Sure.
Um, so that is anger. That response, the response to anyone pushing against my limits, my boundaries, whoa, the other person goes, "Oh, okay, I won't go there." But what we tend to experience is bullying. I mean, I was bullied terribly when I was young. Uh, my wife was bullied. A lot of people I've met were bullied. And when we've pushed the bully, when we've gone back to the bully and stood our ground, the bully retreats
Sure.
because it was all a false thing. So anger is that energy of this is me. I don't take no shit from anybody. But you gotta have claws to defend yourself. You gotta have claws. It's very difficult to defend yourself if you're a weakling who's never lifted a weight.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're just going to end up crumpled in the ground. So, and if you look at animals, all the animals, what do they do when they're babies? They play fight.
Sure.
They all do it. Any animal, especially predator animals, they all play fight from the word go. And we are predators, like it or not. We may not like the idea of it, but we are predators. And so it used to happen in the early, you go back to the Romans or whatever, all the men would play fight, they would grow up fighting.
Good.
So you end up with a healthy sense of boundary of your anger. In the modern world, this is suppressed unless you then go and train in martial arts, for example, or some sort of fighting. And so the individual doesn't have that inner resource of standing up for oneself. Essentially, we're taught to be weaklings.
Mm. Hmm.
So when you are weakling, you suppress your anger. And when you suppress your anger, eventually rage comes out. Whereas anger is very controlled. Anger, anger is not hot. Anger is cold.
Mm.
Anger is like a solid dedication of I'm going for you, and I'll keep going till the end because I'm not putting up with this. It's a solid energy. Everybody knows, and when you see someone who's angry, you back off.
Sure.
You back off. When you see someone who is enraged, you move out of the way because they're a bull in a china shop and they're directionless. They're just exploding left, right, and center. So you don't respect the person who is enraged. You may be wary of them and keep out of their way, but only because they're a loose cannon.
Mm-hmm.
So that is essentially the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So most of us, it was certainly true for me when I was a young lad, we're weak in ourselves and we don't stand up for ourselves. We don't define our limits, our boundaries. So it gets suppressed, it gets suppressed, gets suppressed. And then someone comes out of the sideline who has got nothing to do with because someone else has upset us and we've shut up. We haven't stood our ground. And then someone else comes and boo! And they get it in their neck and it's got nothing to do with the other person. It's unfair. The whole thing is unfair. It's an unfair reactions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'd like to just expand on a few things that you said, which are really interesting. In the work that I do, I would say, let's have a look, at least the first half of this time that I spend with people, the first half of the period they're with me, is to help them to release repressed emotions. It's the first in the healing journey that I help people along. That's the first step. We've got to get to base. We've got to get to a point where all of these repressed emotions are released, and boy, when they come out, boy, you can tell they've been there for a long time. But once they're out, then the job is, like you were saying, is to actually start celebrating the emotions that we have, because the emotions that we have been given to us, God-given, if you want to call them that, because they all have a job. Every emotion has a job. Just as you were saying with anger, there was a course I did which was just talking about emotions, and every emotion has a job. Anger is the putting right of wrongs. That's what anger's there for. It's to, this is not correct. I am going to sort it. Just like you were saying, the shit stops here. And so when we understand that, then we're not scared of expressing anger. But the job of an emotion is this. The ideal balanced is you feel it, you express it, and then it's done. Feel, express, done. And it's the same, with people talk about being guilty. Guilt. The job of guilt is actually for you to put right the wrong that you created, whether that be apologizing, doing something, taking action. But lots of people repress that guilt and it eats them up. And that's the other thing with repression of emotion, especially these big, heavy ones like anger and guilt and sadness. They're eating you up on the inside and they create illness and in lots of different ways, physical, on all of those areas that you've talked about, on the physical level, on the mental level, on the emotional level, and also on the spiritual level as well, that can create illness. So the other point that I wanted to make was just about, you were talking about bullying and repressing the anger of being bullied. And then, there's an expression, just remember, when you're angry, you are not angry for the reason you think you're angry. It's kind of that, that there's something else there that's making you this rage or whatever. But what I've found on with trauma, and it's a bit cliche and it's a bit overused these days. Trauma, I'm traumatized, and really, they've just they've had a bad day. That's not being traumatized. But trauma is brought about by being in a position where you feel powerless and you think that there's no escape. And if you think about bullying, for example, that's exactly where you are. You're powerless and there's no escape. That's a perception. It's not the truth. It's a perception.
Sure.
In those moments, then we become traumatized by that. And that obviously, you need to do something to release that trauma, but it becomes trapped. And so I think that there are two things that have to go on for us to find balance. First of all, we need to clean out this trauma, these repressed emotions. And from that point, then we need to look at our life and say, what needs to change? But lots of people are trying to change their life before they've got the foundation sorted out. And so they're going the wrong directions because they feel, this is definitely where I need to be. Whereas if they came from a place of balance, then they would probably choose a different path. What do you think?
Okay.